All right, let's keep going where we left off. Still about vocational education and apprenticeship programs. We're going to go back to Europe. Denmark offers some programs that are might be interesting. We have a chart of the Danish educational system. Feature of the Danish system is that they do distinguish between the, oh, this is off here. Yeah, sorry. The mainstream and the adult education system. And vocational educational programs exist within both the mainstream and the adult education system. We're going to speak mainly about the mainstream types of programs and qualifications, which is actually this one is. If you like charts, these are really great charts. I love working with charts. You can have a really good visual, you know, and see where certain qualifications fall. Generally, you know, it gives you a good idea about admissions requirements, where they give access to. So the, as I said, the two parallel parts, the adult system, adult education system mirrors the qualifications that can be earned in the mainstream system. And as the name suggests, it's specifically for adults. The elementary and lower secondary education in Denmark is integrated into a single structure, and it is also referred to often as comprehensive education. It represents 9 years of elementary and lower secondary education. There is an optional year in year 10. Education is compulsory until for 10 years. So if students after 9 years do not proceed to academic programs, they still have to enroll in some type of vocational or some type of alternative pathway program. And the Danish ministry website states that education is compulsory and not school. So many kids are homeschooled. That's also present in Denmark. Elementary, lower secondary education is offered at folkeskolen. They can be public, private. There are also a good number of international schools in the country. And these programs conclude with the afgangsprøve either after 9 or after 10 years. Then a little bit more interesting for our purpose, for our topic, are the upper secondary youth education programs. We're going to be speaking about the general upper secondary programs, the vocational upper secondary programs, some initiatives to combine these two, and then also some alternative pathways. So in Denmark, most of these programs have these 3-letter abbreviations. Once you find those on the documents, it's a really good indication to know, what exactly you're dealing with. At the upper secondary, in the upper secondary sector, about 60% of the students pursue their education within this sector. All these 4 programs here represent a total of 12 years of education, and they all grant access to higher education. So there is the STX, you might have seen the Studenterexamen, which is the real academic qualification for students aiming to attend university. Then there is the preparatory examination program, it's the HF. Then there is this HHX and HTX. One of them is the commercial, the other the technical program. And we felt it important to point these out here because these last two, although they are vocationally, sometimes they are referred to as vocationally oriented, even it's in their name, right? It's commercial and technical. However, these are some of those programs that at the beginning we talked about, that these are within the academic streams, and these prepare specifically for university admission and not for an occupation. These programs actually do not grant a vocational qualification for employment. Here is an example of the HTX and the HHX. You see those abbreviations there, HTX, HHX. This is what you want to look for when you find documents. It's not always the abbreviation. For some of the programs, it's not there, but once it's there, it's clear that that's the kind of program that you're dealing with. So those were the general academic, and then let's talk about the actual vocational upper secondary educational program. I don't know if I should even try to pronounce it in Danish. Erfarsutdannelse. Utdannelse is education. That word you will find in almost all of the titles of the different programs. For youth, EUD. In English literature, you're going to find these referred to as a VET. These are the programs that are specifically preparing students for a trade or industry occupation. There are over 100 types, and they each lead to a variety of vocational qualifications. In Denmark, these vocational programs have 2 steps. So first you need to complete a foundation program, and then you can advance to a main program. And then once you are done with these 2, that's when you're gonna earn a final vocational qualification. So the foundation programs, there are about 12 of those, and then the main programs you have 109, a lot more because they offer further specializations, as the name suggests. The foundation program is school-based. They do this first step. During this first step towards the vocational qualification, students do not participate in apprenticeships. So although the program includes workshop-based learning, it is all school-based. And then these programs impart theoretical knowledge, and generally students are admitted with a Folkhögskola qualification or its equivalent, which is at minimum 9 years of elementary and secondary school. Length of the programs varies depending on the field, the study field. And a very interesting feature of the Danish educational system, in my opinion, is also that many of these vocational programs are tailored to the individual student's needs. So sometimes the length does not really mean much, or there is a set length for the program, but you might see that the student took much longer or even shorter to complete something. So that should be kept in mind when assessing some of these credentials. Within this first step of the foundation program, there are 2 parts. Those students who come with 9 years of education, they have to complete this first step, and then the part 2. For those students who have some type of vocational education training already on top of the 9 years, oftentimes they can skip this. Or what also happens is that students complete vocations in a similar field. They won't have to repeat parts of the program, so they can advance right to the part 2 of the foundation part of the program. If somebody only completes the foundation program, which is 2 times about 20 weeks on average, they do take a final examination, or sometimes they have to complete a final project and earn something that could be referred to as a partial qualification. However, and they can use these qualifications to get a job, but this is not really a full qualification to exercise on a profession or on an occupation that requires formal training. Anyone who completes these foundation programs, they are entitled to enter the main program. It's guaranteed that they're going to have a place. So then the next step would be the the specialization part. As I mentioned, there are 109 programs, but then they still lead to a much higher number of vocational qualifications, because within each program they can have a little bit of a different focus. Although everybody has access from the foundation program, everybody has access to one of these main programs, but some of the programs have limitation in terms of how many students they will admit, and it all depends on the needs of the labor market. These vocational education programs are also completed in the dual system that we've talked about a lot today already. And similar to Germany, 1/3 of the time is spent in school and about 2/3 doing the apprenticeship. Students need to find their own places with an approved training company. The length of the programs really varies. It could be anything between 1 and 5. Again, this also depends on the student's needs. In technical subjects, generally, they last about 3 or 3.5 years. In commercial subjects, they are mostly 2 years. And the individual plans are put together between the schools, companies, and the students. So they all work together to come up with a training plan for the student. Once the apprenticeship program part of the training is completed, the training company issues a certificate to both the student and the trade committee within that trade. There are also final examinations that are taken. There are different varieties. In some occupations, there is a final examination only by the school. In others, only by the trade committee. Those are usually called a Svendeprov. I don't know if any of you have seen any of those. These journeyman certificates, which is like the German version of the Gesellenbrief or Gesellenprüfung. And then sometimes you would see final examination from both the school and the trade committee as well. Here is an example of the Svendeprov. Brev, sorry. This is in hairdressing, again. It's a 4-year program. It's actually written there. Sometimes the documents give really good information on the length, which would be the nominal length. Again, the student might have taken shorter or longer to complete. They are multilingual, which can help also. You have it in Danish. I think it's in English, German, and French. Then, since 2010, Denmark introduced a combination of these two that we just mentioned. You know, the ones with the STX, HX, and HTX, and HF, combined with these vocational programs. I have not seen documents, but the aim is to bridge the gap between the general academic and the vocational qualifications, so that students who are enrolled in one of these programs working towards gaining an occupational qualification, the Danish system wants, and government wants to provide an opportunity for the students to also earn a qualification that will give them access to higher education. And these programs, since the aim of these programs is such to grant access to higher education and employment, they generally culminate with a journeyman certificate and also one of those previous diplomas that we mentioned, either the STX, HX, or HTX. These programs are based on the vocational programs, and just as for the vocational training programs, the length varies here too. Then when I was looking through a little bit more through these programs that are offered in the country, it's very clear also that the Danish system offers pathways for students who are not necessarily progressing with the rest of their peers. They want to make sure that they're not left behind. I see this kind of school, which is called a Produktionsskola, production schools, as one of those attempts. These schools are meant for students who are 25 or under, and they have not completed upper secondary education or cannot find a way to get into any of those vocational programs, for example. These schools admit students who have the Folkeskola examen that represents completion of compulsory education, or sometimes those students who, for example, as you see, completed the foundation part of the vocational program, but for whatever reason they did not proceed to the vocational, the main part of the vocational programs. So they want to keep them in school. They want to keep them interested in an occupation. They want to give them the opportunity to possibly try out something else. And then if they find their calling within that field, then complete an actual occupational qualification. These Produktionsskola programs are workshop-based. They emphasize learning through experience and practical work. However, it does not include an apprenticeship component. And these are really short term. These are really to introduce students to other fields and just keep them in school and keep them going. And then there's something else called the basic vocational education and training. These are also, it's a little bit longer term than the Produktionsskole programs, but these are for students under 30 or under, who are also not enrolled in a school, or they are also not employed, and they don't meet the conditions to get admitted into any of the other programs that would provide them with an actual qualification, either at the secondary or post-secondary level. So the aim is to provide them the necessary preparation so that they can get admitted to any of those vocational programs that we talked about earlier. As such, because the aim is to get admitted to one of these vocational programs, they are geared towards both employment and continuing education. Admission requirements vary. They can last anything between 1.5 to 3 years. And these types of programs do have an apprenticeship component, just like for the main part where students complete apprenticeships, about 2/3 of the time is spent in the company learning on-the-job practical skills. They also complete school-based coursework as well. And the elements, I mean, because they prepare for admission to these vocational programs, the elements for these programs are very similar, and many times they are taken from the actually already developed one of those occupations that we mentioned. So I just found one of these students where we have an Afgangsbevis, which represents, this one represents actually 10 years. This was completed in the 90s. We assumed, or the student didn't submit anything in between for evaluation. So then he comes back in 2000, I think 6 or 9, with one of these Grundutbildning, which is this basic educational programs, and it looks like it took them a while, and I remember the person was born in 1977, so she's about 29 years old when they start this program, which is in alignment with what we said, that these programs are for students 30 or under, and then this specific program lasts 3 years, so they're there from 2006 to 2009. And this is just a list of the parallel qualifications that students can earn if they are enrolled in the adult education system. Again, they all have these abbreviations. If you ever come across any of these, then this gives you a good idea of where to place them. And some resources. Do you have any questions for Denmark? Good. I think the next one, and country, Netherlands. Any of you seeing Dutch? You here at the table, ladies, maybe? Again, start with a chart. What we're going to look at here, so this is primary education, then we have the lower secondary actually here, and then this is like the lower and upper secondary combined. And these are, on this chart, the upper secondary vocational qualifications that we're going to focus more on, but we're going to present a little bit what comes before. So this is what we're going to be talking about. If you see here, primary education, it says 8 years, starting at age 4. Might be interesting to point out that oftentimes these 8 years of primary education is comparable to 6 years of elementary education in most countries, just because the first 2 years are not necessarily comparable to elementary education in the rest of the world. Students are 4 years generally when they start the elementary program. Again, it's probably useful for evaluators to work with the Dutch terms when looking at documents. Following primary education, student enrolled in secondary education, which can be either the academic here. If you have heard about the HAVO and the VWO qualifications from Netherlands, the general secondary education has these two tracks. You can earn a senior general secondary education diploma, the Hoger Allgemein Fortgesetzt Onderwijs. If we count that the primary education represents, let's say, 6 years of elementary education, these programs add an additional 5 years for a total of 11 years. And these programs and diplomas will grant access to University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. And then they have the more academic, purely academic programs, which lead to the VWO diploma. These are 1 year longer. They comprise of 3 years of lower level and 3 years of upper level secondary education. These are, within the academic stream. However, the HAVO diploma does have some vocational orientation again. And they don't give access to universities, but they give access to University of Applied Sciences within a similar field that they studied at the secondary level. Let's look at the vocational secondary programs. So after the 6 years of elementary education, students can enter either they go one of those academic routes, or they can enter something called pre-vocational secondary education. It's voorbereidend, means preparatory in Dutch. These last 4 years, so for a total of 6 + 4, 10 years of education. These 4 years also can be broken down into 4 years of an initial lower level training and 2 years of upper level training. They have 4 pathways. They all lead to this VMBO diploma. It could be this BB, KB, GL, or TL, the theoretical programs. These last two, with the more theoretical or the combined focus, if students complete the first 2 years of these programs, they can transfer to the academic track, either in one of those HAVO or VWO programs. So there is a possibility to change tracks for academically more advanced or successful students. This qualification has had other names previously. One of them is the Middelbaar Allgemein Fortgesetzt Onderwijs. I really like this word. The abbreviation is a MAVO. That also stands for one of these 10-year qualifications, but earlier ones might have different names. Here is an example. This says on the top, Diploma Voorbereidend, Middelbaar Beroepsonderwijs. Just as in Denmark, although the Danish documents do have the actual abbreviations, the Dutch don't. But if you look, this is a V, M, B, and then O there. So the VMBO. You can figure out what programs we are dealing with. So again, this is a 4-year program after 10 years of education for a total of 10 years. So these are lower level secondary vocational programs. Some older ones, the MAVO that I just mentioned. This is a newer one. It's so easy to see. Then, once students complete one of those preparatory programs, they can advance into one of these senior secondary vocational education and training, or VET programs. These are also referred to as the Middelbaar, which is middle vocational education in Dutch. They are governed by the Dutch Act on Adult and Vocational Education, which was enacted in 1997. Any of these, the upper secondary vocational programs can be offered at either regional training centers, these ROCs, which are multidisciplinary. They have a specific agricultural training centers and also some specialized vocational colleges that offer these types of programs. they lead to 4 different levels of qualifications in the Netherlands. The level 1 leads to, it's 1 year in length, leads to an MBO Diploma 1, and so forth. Level 2 leads to an MBO 2. These are all at the upper secondary level. Level 4 is also 3 years, sometimes 4 years in length, and they generally also include a management training component for lower level management positions. And students who complete the level 4 qualification, they generally get access to the Universities of Applied Science, which is the HBO, the diploma hub, like those programs at one of these higher hoger beroeps schools. So for all of these programs, these are also organized in the dual system, meaning that part of the training takes place in school, and then they also have work placement. Just like we've seen that in Germany and Denmark, students have to look for their own placement company, but then it's the school that's ultimately responsible for their contract. The companies that provide the training have to be accredited by this Stichting. It's a cooperation organization for vocational education, training, and the labor market. And here is another sample where terms are used possibly differently than what we might think they mean, because the training, the on-the-job training component, which we have been referring to as apprenticeship, has 2 different names. They can be either, they refer to them not as apprenticeship, but work placement. And they have 2 different pathways. They can do either a school-based program where the practical component, the in-company component, is called a practice placement, or they can do a work-based pathway where the work placement itself is called apprenticeship. So technically, this practice placement is also an apprenticeship program, but then they refer to these BOL types of programs as an apprenticeship. But these are both, these pathways both represent the dual system. A few more information about the different pathways. The main difference between those school-based and work-based pathways is that in the school-based, students have to spend at least 20% doing the apprenticeship and maximum 60%. The rest of the time is spent in school. And for the workplace pathway, at least 60% of the time is spent in the industry at a company. So that's why it's work-based, 60%, it's a lot. And sometimes it's even way higher than that. In both cases, students do sign a placement contract and they do get financial compensation. And here are some samples of these final qualifications. Here we don't have the diploma, but the transcript. If you probably don't see, but it says Niveau 3. So this MBO represents a level 3 qualification. They also issue this certificate, which generally describes the student's learning outcome, not just the final examination grades. I have another one here on the right, these 2 pages. This one is a level 4 qualification. So I don't know if we have time to go online, for example, but there is a central register of vocational qualifications. If you ever come across any of these Dutch credentials, you can just go on this website called CREBO. It's the abbreviation of Central Register of Vocational Qualifications. And you can just, if we go back, I don't even know if you see there, it's kind of small, but there's a number there, which is the CREBO number. So you just can take the number, and then you can go to this website. The link is right here. It's going to be part of your slides that we send you later. You can just click, plug in the number, click search, and it's going to give you a lot of information about the specific program that you're dealing with. The numbers have changed for Crebo, the Crebo numbers, so if you can't find it, try here. It says, to look up the new number that's equivalent to the old number, and then you go back here again. We have one sample. I don't think we need to go into that more in detail, but here are the steps to find the current Crebo number. It's actually a different number. And there is a lot of good information on the level. You see there, this is like the final result of the search. You can't really see it, unfortunately, but it is a level 4 qualification. This is in marketing and communication. And we have some resources included. I think that's it. Kate? Okay.
We're getting there, folks. We have something fun at the end. So we wanted to go a little bit over these perito, which actually in Spanish means expert. So even though you see expert, doesn't mean it's post-secondary. It's an expert program completed at the secondary level. So they can be prepared for a profession and employment. And depending on the country, it may or may not lead to secondary studies, so be very careful about that. For example, in Guatemala, they're 3 years following 9 years of primary and lower secondary. And these are the 3 most common perito qualifications. They'll be either in accounting, advertising, or administration. So definitely secondary if you see perito. What's going on? And here's an example of a perito in accounting with a specialty in computing. Okay. The other thing we wanted to talk about is teacher training programs. It's very common in many countries for primary school teachers to be taught at the secondary school level. So be very careful with that when you do see a primary school teacher qualification, because it could have been taught at the primary school level. You have to really research the admissions requirements and also look at the time frame, because in many countries where primary school teachers were at one time taught at the secondary school level, it has now moved to the post-secondary level. The teacher training at the secondary level is most prevalent in Africa and Latin America. So if you do see one, get one from Africa or Latin America, once again, research to make sure where the time frame it was offered, and if it was at that time frame a secondary or had it moved to post-secondary. These will represent 11, 12, or 13 years of education, so they will always lead to teacher certification. So once these students finish these programs, it will give them the authority or the permission to work as a primary school teacher in that country. In some Latin American countries, they're earning their primary school teacher certification, but they still have to take the examinations leading to the bachillerato. All right, so there's so many of them, but we just wanted to give you a list of some of the countries where teacher training is still at the primary school level. Even though I said it was primarily in Latin America and Africa, it's, for example, Indonesia and Haiti and Laos are still, these are countries where primary school teachers are still taught at the secondary school level. So just be really careful about that. Mm-hmm. Wait.
For example, in Mexico, the word professor is misinterpreted many times. That's the thing that you got to really watch out for, the word professor many times, because that's at the secondary and post-secondary level.
Yes. Thank you.
We can also add Cuba to that list.
This is not comprehensive by any means. You can see I went through Liberia and I just had to stop, or I would have had about five more slides with these. And I also skipped countries too, so just wanted to give you some examples of how it's Africa, Latin America, and Indonesia and Laos, for example. So here's an example of two primary teacher training program certificates from Guatemala. The first one is Título de Maestra. Sometimes you'll get really bad translations that translate maestra to master. It drives me crazy, but it's teacher. And same, this first one is for somebody who did pre-primary or in the United States, we would call it early childhood education. And the other one was somebody who was a urban primary school teacher. So I guess, I'm just guessing that it's preparing to somebody to teach primary school in an urban area rather than somebody who's not in a more remote or rural area. Okay. So going back again a little bit, the other thing is, Juan, you brought up the technical programs. There are different levels of technical, but they can be at the secondary level and the post-secondary level, so you have to be really, really careful when you see them to make sure that what level they are. The things that you see most often are the Título Técnico, which is basically the translation is technician, or a mid-level technician. And depending on the country, they may or may not lead to post-secondary study, but these programs are mainly to prepare somebody for a profession. They're really not aiming to prepare these people for any type of post-secondary study. And if so, it would be more of a higher level post-secondary vocational study, usually in the same profession. Juan?
Just to reiterate very briefly, you mentioned Bachillerato Tecnológico earlier, referring to Mexico. They also have the Secundaria Técnica, 9th grade. And you see that in many of these Latin American countries. But when it ends with Técnica is a lot of times lower secondary. Tecnológico could be upper secondary. So that distinction exists in Latin America.
Yeah, you have to, it's all country specific for Latin America. So here's some examples. The first one is from Cuba, and this is a técnico médico in inorganic chemistry, go figure. The next one is from Honduras in computing, and once again, in Argentina, it's chemical. I see chemical something else. So chemistry. I can't read it. I think it's chemical technician. Yeah. So these are some examples of the different kinds of technical diplomas that are around. Okay. Finally, nurse training. Many countries still, nurses are trained at the secondary school level. So once again, if you're from a country where nurses are always trained at the post-secondary level and you're evaluating this type of credential, make sure to look and be sure of where the program was actually completed, because they'll have a title that'll sound like it's a post-secondary program. It was really at the secondary school level. And these programs usually don't lead to post-secondary study, but if they do, it would be further study as a nurse. So they might be given some advanced standing in a post-secondary nursing program. Once again, there are many, many countries that offer nurse training programs at the secondary. So I gave you a bunch of different credentials. And you can see it's Europe, it's Latin America, it's Africa. So just to give you an example of all these different places that offer these types of nurse training programs. This one is from Nepal. Nepal is one that you have to be really, 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 really careful of, because this is the proficiency certificate from Nepal in nursing. I won't say which state, but there's a state in the United States that does their own evaluations for nurse licensure. And they let this person sit for the nurse licensure exam in the United States, which normally you have to have completed at least 2 years of post-secondary training. So this person is licensed as a registered nurse in the United States. And in the United States, if you earn your nurse license in one state, most states will recognize it and you can get licensed. So this person's licensed in 2 states, even though they completed their nurse training at the secondary school level. And that's because someone in that state didn't do their homework, just saw a nurse, oh, this is fine, we'll take it. So just be really, really careful. Okay. Here's an example of Germany. I'm not going to pronounce it because I can have somebody from Germany pronounce. This is an example of a nurse training program at the secondary school level in Germany.
I cannot read
Yeah.
it from here, but
Yeah.
I can read Urkunde und Zeugnis.
All I know is Kranken is nurse. And I know Kinderkrankenschwester. So yeah, it's a pediatric nurse. So Germany still trains their nurses at the secondary school level, but they do have post-secondary level nurses. Okay. This is the end of the vocational part of the program. We're going to go quickly into the next part, and then we can have the fun part, and then, because you all look like, this is just, if you could see all of your faces. All right, so we've thrown a lot of information out at you. Okay, we're just going to quickly go through distance education. Is distance education big in any of your countries? Okay, well, it is big in a lot of countries. It's very big in countries, especially those countries that have remote populations, where it's just not feasible to build a school for just a few children in that area. There used to be known as correspondence schools. China has, and still has, radio and television schools where students can learn through the radio or through the television. Right now, these programs are not known as correspondence schools. They're all basically online education programs. We'll talk a little bit about distance education in the US because it's very big here. Especially at the secondary school level, they're all online. And they're known as, we talked about earlier about cyber charter schools, where their students can go online. And most of these programs are accredited and recognized by the State Board of Education, Department of Education. Some of them aren't, so you have to be really careful. But these 3 programs here, these 4 high schools are accredited by the Distance Education Crediting Commission, which is a legitimate accrediting agency in the United States. But there are other programs that are recognized by the State Department of Education, so you have to be careful that you see that. There is one school, I think it's in Florida, that many athletes used. You might know that, Garrett. There's an online charter school that's really not recognized, but many athletes use it because they have failed miserably in high school. I can't remember the name of it, but it's not recognized by the state of Florida. So these coaches were telling these kids to go to this online school to get their high school diploma, and it was worthless. So, online education is not so big in Canada, but we just wanted to tell you, like, for example, in Yukon Territory is up in northwestern Canada, very remote populations, and they have the Aurora Virtual School, which is a online school that the government of the provincial government in Yukon has set up for students who needed distance education. Australia, distance education, because it's such a big country with so many people living in remote areas, they also offer distance education. But in order to be approved to have distance education, you have to, each state or territory requires you to get approval before you can even start. And so they have all these different reasons. I thought geographic isolation of 3 kilometers or more from school. I didn't understand that as being geographically isolated, 3 kilometers, but that's what they consider. So most of it is, there are some schools, I mean, there are 50 or more kilometers there's a school 50 more kilometers, so those are the students that are going to be using it. And there's all these other issues that similar to people who wanted to use homeschool or home education in Australia.
I used to have school phobia. Like vocationally talented students.
Yeah, we thought you were a vocationally talented student, Shams. I hope it wasn't pregnancy. Okay. And I went on, I found distance education resources from each state or territory in Australia. So you can go onto these websites and it'll talk to you. It gives you information on what the requirements are for distance education in each state or territory. Mexico offers the Bachillerato en Línea, the online Bachillerato. It was first created in 2006, so if you see a Bachillerato en Línea prior to 2006, it's probably not legit. So each state in Mexico has these colegios de bachilleres, and each of those colegios coordinate and administer these online bachilleratos in each state in Mexico. You don't have to, there's no age limit, so you can be 85 years old and still go back and get your bachillerato. It's free. Takes 18 to 24 months, depending on how many courses you take per month. So you could get your bachillerato in a year and a half. And they do offer academic, and they are vocational. Right now, the only vocational ones are in human resources management, accounting, and computer systems. So at least those are the only ones I could find. And even though it's distance education, you do have to physically go to one of these authorized evaluation centers to take the examination leading to the bachillerato. And there are a bunch of them all over the country, so it's really not that onerous for somebody to actually go and take the examination. And I've got resources there for you on all these different distance education ones. I got one for Jalisco, and then the one for the government, the federal government. And here's an example of one, a telebachillerato from the state of Oaxaca. It was the only one I could find in our database. It just came about purely by accident. So. Okay. Finland is really big in distance education too. It's only for upper secondary, so anybody in primary or lower secondary has to go to a physical school, but they can do their distance education for upper secondary. Once again, in 1997 it started, so if you see any of these programs before 1997, check it out. They're mainly for adults. It's for adults who maybe they dropped out, they finished part of secondary school and they want to go back. It's for adults who did finish it for upper secondary, but they want to supplement what they learned. Maybe they didn't earn grades that were as good as they wanted to, so it's basically a second chance to take some of these courses. Once again, vocational students at vocational institutions who want to earn an academic secondary school qualification at the same time as they're earning a vocational one. Polytechnic students. And there are 9 regional networks in Finland that offer these distance education programs. And some more resources for you. And then they're really good in English resources. Okay, finally, this is the last part, and then we can be fun. Adult education for adults who didn't complete secondary school. And it all depends on the country. It can be very formal study or it can be informal study. And it's also an opportunity for adults who never finished school to come back and earn the qualification they need to go if they want to go on to post-secondary study. So in the United States, adult education is very big. It's through the General Education Diploma or the GED. And I found it very interesting. All of us in the United States all know the GED, but I didn't know where it actually started. It was actually started by the Army, US Army, because it was World War II, and they needed to figure out how to assess the academic skills of all these soldiers. So this is how the GED program started. You can prepare yourself for the GED. You can actually go to test preparation courses, or you can just do self-study. Your eligibility depends on the state. Even though the GED, the company that administers the GED says that you have to be at least 16 and not enrolled in school, most states require you to be at least 17 because they don't want people to drop out of school and say, oh, I can just drop out and go take the GED. So they want them to stay in school at least through the age of 16. It's also offered in Canada and other countries. So that's what we talked about earlier about the online, or homeschooling. For homeschooling, that many people in Canada do the GED because they can't get that provincial or territory diploma. And there's 4 content areas. And in the United States, if somebody submits and shows that they have earned the GED, it is considered equivalent to a high school diploma. It's not any less. It was just high school equivalency earned in a different pathway. So they don't actually get a diploma. They get a transcript, which I'll show you. And the GED is accepted for admission to colleges and universities across the country. So this is an example of a transcript. So they'll get, this is all they're going to get. They're not going to get a diploma. But it'll have all the different areas that they took, and that circled area there will say either pass or failed. So this is what you would use, what the colleges and universities would receive when they want to consider somebody for admission. Okay. Brazil had what they called the Telecurso 2000. It was only offered until 2014, and I found it was really interesting. It was both academic and vocational, and they had all these different modules. But it was also offered in different ways. So they called it an organized reception. So they had all these little organized groups where they would go and they would spend 2 hours a day with a tutor, or they had a controlled one where they watched their lessons on the television. So actually, Telecurso was all offered through the television. And then they met with a tutor once a week, or they just watched the television lessons on their own. So this isn't offered anymore, but I thought it would be important that you should know this.
They do have other exams that they do not for.
I'm sorry?
They have other exam-based high school diplomas now.
Yeah. And then Costa Rica, they have the baccalaureate by sufficient maturity. They also have the diversified distance education. In order to sit and earn these diplomas in Costa Rica, you have to have finished at least 9 years of education, and you have to be at least 18. And also in 2016, the State Distance University signed an agreement with the Ministry of Education to offer programs leading to these. So normally you would go to a school and do them, but now you can also do them through a distance education program offered by the State Distance University. Estonia, same thing. They have part-time upper secondary schools for adults. And it's also open to students who finish vocational programs. So these students have finished a vocational program and decided that they want to get an academic secondary school qualification because they want to go on to further study. Lithuania, they passed a whole law on non-formal adult education. So it was really one of their top priorities was to develop in the education sphere was to develop adult education after they joined the EU. So they have, once again, it's very similar to that old Telecurso in Brazil. It's either formal non-formal or informal learning. Greece, I love it. They call them second chance schools in Greece. So you have to be 18 to 40 and you haven't finished your education. And there are 57 programs. It's 2 years. And they don't get the secondary school, the Politerian. They don't get that, but they get a certificate that they consider equivalent to that. So, and that can be used to apply for post-secondary study in Greece. In Spain, Spain was another one that part of the organic law and education that if adult education is going to be offered, it has to lead to an official certificate. If it's going to lead to an official certificate, it has to be offered in a mainstream or specific educationalist institution. So it can't be offered in a training organization. So you have to go to a mainstream school or an institution that has been approved by the provincial government. So it's very decentralized, though, and once again, up to age 64. So if you're over 64, you can't go back to school. But each region within Spain has developed their own adult education programs. So you have to go on the government of the region to find out information about those. India, even though we talked about the National Institute of Open Schooling, about how many parents in India use the NIOS curriculum for homeschooling, this also offers, the NIOS also offers adult education in India. So the NIOS is under the Ministry of Human Resource Development. So it's not under one of the state boards of education. So be very careful about that. And they offer secondary and senior secondary programs. They also offer vocational. So you can see how many students, 71,000 students are in upper secondary. So when you think about the population of India, it's a very small number, but it is growing there. And they also offer this NIOS programs at study centers in Kuwait, Muscat, Nepal, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. And I'm just guessing that this is for many Indians go to these countries to work. So it's an opportunity for them to earn a secondary school certificate. We talked about Preparatoria Abierta before in Mexico, but it's also open to adults, not just school-age children. And you talked about this, Juan. They earn a certificate of completion of studies. So they're not going to earn the bachillerato, but it is considered equivalent to a bachillerato. So sometimes, in some countries, you're going to get these certificates that says a certificate of end of studies. It just means that they finished. It doesn't mean that actually is a secondary school qualification. But it does mean they have finished, and it is considered a benchmark end of secondary school qualification in Mexico. Okay, phew. Okay. So we're going to play a game, and it's a fun game, but please don't leave. Are you leaving? Oh, okay. 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 Oh, we have it. We have it. We have their emails. No, we have them all. We have. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. You can see we have a crack tech guy here. Ooh, defensive much? All right. So. Okay. Yeah. There you go. You have to start it, though. You have to turn on. You have to push it and then put this up by the, you need the sound.
Oh, the sound's going to project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So It's not projecting. There's no music. Oh, jeez. Let's start from the beginning. I spent a lot of time on this, Shams. There's no music. No, this music is important. No, really. Huh? It was on at one point, yeah. All right, how many of you watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Okay. All right, this is Who Wants to Be a Credentials Evaluator, okay? Do we have somebody who wants to take the first question? Because we will have prizes. Well, we did have prizes, but somebody we won't name left them on the train from New York. So, wasn't me. Okay. So if you look for us, if you do win, look for us on Wednesday. We will have your prize on Wednesday. It doesn't until I start it. Well, you get to ask the audience or ask the experts, okay? So Shams, Ilya, and I are the experts, and then you have your audience, okay? All right, so. What is the main characteristic of an apprenticeship program? Is it academics are a majority of the program? B, opportunity to get rich? C, on-the-job industry training, or mandatory fitness sessions?
I'll go with C, final answer.
You sure? You sure? Fine answer? Okay. Yay, so you won. Okay. All right, we get another volunteer because we have to spread the wealth. Okay. Okay. Who would like to try next? A volunteer? Come on. Okay, back there. Okay. What are the two main types of vocational education? A, terminal and preparatory, B, homeschool, C, peanut butter and jelly, or D, carpentry and joinery? Okay, final answer. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? See, they're not that hard. Okay, Juan. Which of these is a reason to homeschool? Okay. Too tired to go to school? B, bullying? Too old for regular school? Or D, to learn social skills?
B.
Final answer?
B.
Final answer?
Yeah, final answer. Bullying.
Okay,
yeah,
you have to say final answer.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I was paying attention.
Okay. B, final answer.
B. B as in B as in boy.
Yay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Shankar? Why would someone enroll in adult education? To earn a secondary qualification? B, to earn a graduate degree? C, they're bored at home? Or D, they forgot world history?
Well, I know they remember world history, so that can't be it. Graduate degree. Okay. A, final answer.
Okay, Yay. Okay. Yeah, I think we got one or two more. Anybody? Come on. Any other volunteers? Huh? We need somebody from this table. All right, good, yay. We got a volunteer. What is a Berufsschule? It offers apprenticeships only. It's a secondary school and dual system. It's only offered in some Länder, or it's a D, an online vocational program. And remember, you have Access, Expert, and Ask the Audience.
I have asked the expert.
Okay. No, the question is which expert?
Which expert?
Which expert? It's either me, Ildi, or Shams.
LD.
Okay. That's my mistake. Yeah, I see where I. Huh? Ildi, what's the answer from?
Maybe, I guess it's B. Yeah, I choose B.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, final answer.
Okay. Yay. I think we have one more. Anybody else? Come on. No. One time. Okay, great. Which organization offers adult education programs in India? NIOS, NCAA, MAGA, or NAGAP?
Audience? A.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah. Your final answer.
Nobody got MAGA? None of my American friends got MAGA? Okay. Okay. Final answer? Yay. Okay, I've got one more. One more, yeah. Who would like, this is an easy one. Come on, who would like to try this one? No? Juan, you've got your turn. All right, Marie Carla Richard. Okay. Who would attend a cyber charter school? A spy, an undercover investigator, a graduate student, or a 16-year-old professional musician?
D.
Final answer? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I think that was it. Oh, I did have another one. This is what happens when you're sitting watching TV. Okay, this is a really, Juan, put your hand down. Karen. All right, which country offers preparatoria abierta? Mexico, Brazil, Guatemala, or Honduras?
A, final answer.
Okay. Yay. Now, I'm pretty positive this is it. Yeah, that was it. Okay, thank you so much, folks, for coming to the workshop. I've got certificates for you. So after you fill out an fill out an evaluation and bring it back up to us, you can get your certificate of attendance. Great, thank you.